Hello and welcome to my channel. Hi, I'm Wendy J. Haney, and today I'm going to show you another block to make. Yep, we're working on blocks now. Trying to get ahead of the game and get more videos in my queue. So have time for a block today. This one Kevin picked out. It is called Shipping Dreams. Yep, it's a sailboat. And Kevin loves, he sailed after college. He's a boating guy. So when he saw this, he goes, oh, do that one, do that one. I'll admit, I'm not quite a fan of the colors I picked out, but I don't know. Are you like me where you've got this huge stash of fabric and yet when you want to go do something, oh, that's not quite right, or that, or oh, I really don't want to waste that fabric on this. I found this fabric in a fat quarter and at first thought, oh, that'd be perfect for the water. And then later I'm like, oh yeah, but I love it so much and it's so perfect. And oh, I don't want to use it for just 2 sample blocks. Yeah. So I finally said, enough, just get it done. So here we go. Anyway, this is an 8-inch finished block. It is made up of 6 half square triangles, 2 2.5-inch squares, or you could go 2.5 by 4.5 to make this a little simpler and eliminate this seam here. This seam got a little bulky because of how I pressed the others. You've got a 2.5 by 8.5 inch for your water, and 2.5 by 4.5 inch of your background. So you need 3 fabrics. Each of these rows is 2.5, these rows or this row. These columns, these rows are 2.5-inch unfinished. I will also have a template that you can request that I'll give you the sizes to do a 12-inch block, which will make these a little bit bigger. We are going to make our half square triangles because we need 6 of them, an even number, and they're all the same fabrics. We're using 3-inch squares to make 2 half square triangles at a time and make this pretty lickety split. Now, I do have another video that shows you how to make half square triangles 1, 2, and 4 at a time. And if you decide, I was thinking maybe, I don't know, the sails at least could be a little scrappy, or maybe the boat. I don't know, just a thought. So if you want to do half square triangles 1 at a time using your scraps for the sails, you can do that. Otherwise, you could do 4 at a time for this and 2 at a time for that. But we're going to keep it simple in this video. And there we go. Okay, so for our bottom, our water, a 2.5 by 8.5 inch strip of fabric. For our background, we're doing 3, and you'll notice my pins on there. This fabric is really unusual to tell the front from the back, but there is a difference, so I pin them so I make sure I don't flip them around. 3 3-inch squares to make our half square triangles, and 2 2.5 by 4.5 inch strips. Okay, that's a lot of your background fabric. And then for your ship, we've got our 3 3-inch squares. You could do 2 2.5-inch squares or a 2.5 by 4.5. Your choice on that one. You know, it's pretty straightforward of knowing how to put this together once you've got your blocks laid out with a 2.5-inch square. So this time I'm going to use my 2.5 by 4.5-inch strip instead. There we go. That's all you need. Okay, let's get started. Let's do our half square triangles first. Those are the easiest to get done. All of these are going to be the same. And we're going to take, I like to use my Quilter's Magic Wand, and we're going to put it on this fabric. There is an etched line in the middle we're going to put that corner to corner and then get a marking pen. I happen to use a Fusion clickable Fusion pen, and tilt that and trying to get as close to that as possible and mark it on both sides. You are going to do that with all three of your, you choose whether you're marking on your background fabric or your ship fabric. I just happen to choose that one. Then you're going to put right sides together of your 3-inch squares. You're going to do that for all of them. After you've marked them, I like to pin them up here in the corners to keep them secure. Then you're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch on the line. I actually, in this case, these, by the way, the method I'm using to make these gives you some wiggle room. You're going to have to square up and trim your finished 2.5-inch half square triangles when you're done. I just prefer this method. It makes things more exact when I'm done because I'm not perfect, and every time I try to do the no trim method and have it exact, it's not quite exact. So I just go with this. You're not trimming off a lot. So that's what we're doing here. So I like to stitch just slightly on the inside of that line. So I'm stitching closer to the middle than on the outside. That gives you a little more flexible with your trimming, and it's really not going to make a difference as far as your 1/4 inch. So go ahead and do that. Mark your 3 pieces of 3.5-inch, 3-inch squares, 3-inch squares, and then put right sides together and go stitch them up, and then we'll have those done. You will now have 3 of these where your lines are stitched. You're going to come back and cut them in the middle. A lot of times I will just take them to the ironing board directly and use my shears to trim them between instead of coming back to the cutting board. Then finger press them. Press to whichever makes sense for you from your colors of your fabric. My green is a little bit darker, so I'm pressing that way. I have finger pressed those. You're going to want to take them to the ironing board and truly press them before you trim them up. Okay? So I have another one of these that I've already pressed, and then I get my Omni Grid. I have an Omni Grid 6.5-inch ruler that I love because it has my 45-degree angle on it that goes corner to corner. So I put that on my block, and then I make sure that I can see my 2.5-inch line all the way around, and there's enough trim room, or it's completely square. And then my angle is on the angle of the half square triangle. And we trim one side, flip it around, match up your 2.5-inch corner down here on the bottom. And when you do that, should be even here with the edge, even here with your edge, and your angle should still be solidly on the angle of your HST. And you trim again. All right, so you will end up with 6 of those. The simplest way to do this, in my opinion, is to lay things out. As I said, you can put your 2.5-inch squares here in the middle, or a 2.5 by 4.5. Your choice. This time I'm going to use a 2.5 by 4.5. And then I'm going to put my background sides on, and we're going to fake it with these until I trim them up so I don't have to do another cut in my video. There we go. So you have them all laid out. What I'm going to go press these and trim these up, and then what I found is really slick is I can do this and that. So 1/4 of an inch on those. I'm going to flip that up to there and that up to there, making sure you know which side you're sewing on so that you don't get them. Let's see, if you sewed on the other one, hey, guess what? If you sewed on either one of these, you'll be fine. So 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch. Go ahead and get those 4 pieces done. If you're using your 2.5 inch squares, don't worry about them. Don't worry about those. Okay, go get those done. And then we'll be able to start putting more things together. I have my pieces sewn together, as I mentioned, and I'm laying them out. I haven't pressed them yet. What I suggest you do is press your 2 middle pairs of half square triangles in opposite directions. That will eliminate the bulk, and those will be able to nest very well. If you're doing your 2.5 inch squares here, put those on now, and then you can press those in opposite directions. Here's the little bit of rub of where I've decided to go with my 2.5 by 4.5 inch strip instead, is that I want to press these both up to eliminate bulk from pressing them down towards the half square triangles. So I want to press those up, which means both of these will end up down. Well, you know what? We're going to get a little bit of a quandary no matter what. So 1/2 of one, 6 of the other. Either way, we're going to set those aside. So press these in opposite directions. Actually you could press, let's get done one at a time, shall we? Instead of complicating this. Press these in opposite directions and then put them together and stitch your 1/4 inch seam. Open that up and then come back and put your 2.5 by 4.5 inch strip there. I also like this method. It does cut down on a seam, but depending on your fabric choices, whatever works for you. And we're going to do that. Then we'll press this based on these. That's why laying it out this way kind of helps you figure out the best way with your method of pressing your seams to eliminate as much bulk as possible. And if necessary, we can press seams open to help eliminate some bulk. I'm going to go get my middle section done, and then we'll come back and add these into it. I now have my middle section done. As I sewed these 2 columns together, I realized they were the perfect spot to do a pinwheel pressing, to keep that, nice and close and not have a lot of bulk there. So I've got that in there. I've done a pinwheel, which you just twist your seams there a little bit and you pinwheel it. And that worked perfectly. I then added my 2.5 by 4.5 inch strip on the bottom, and I pressed towards the bottom because this is going to work perfectly now when I combine this with my other 2 pieces. So we have that. So this, because I've pressed this to the bottom, yay! That means I can press these the way I want. I can press them up and away from my half square triangle. So now you're going to put these on top of these and stitch a 1/4 inch on both sides. And I always like to flip it so that I'm stitching where I've got my seams on top so I can see them and watch my points there to ensure I don't chop off a point and my 1/4 inch. So we're going to go get that done before we put on the water. Okay, we have the top, the background, and the boat all done. And So sad. I have my sails upside down. Yep. Stay tuned. I need to go fix those. Now that I did a little ripping and putting back together again, we have the top section done. So you can press how you'd like. One way or another, you're going to have to end up pressing something, overlapping something. So either you press that way and keep it away from these half squares, which means you're going to put it down there and get some bulk there, or you could do what I've decided to do, which is a pinwheel. Yep, I'm still going to have a little bit of bulk there and there. Or your other option is to, which we don't do very often in quilting, is to press it open. I'm going to leave that up to you on how you see fit with that. I'm going to go ahead and go with my pinwheel option. So I'm going to press both of those. Then we come back here, make sure I've got the right side up of my water, and we're going to put our top section of the background and the boat onto our 2.5 by 8.5 inch strip. Match up your corners. For me, I gotta tug it a little bit to make sure it fits there. If you've got good 1/4 inch seams, this should match pretty doggone well. Ease it in though if you need to. We're going to stitch that on, and then we've got ourselves a finished block. Okay, make sure I'm putting it on the right side. And there we have it. The water is on, and I've pressed the seam to the bottom. There we go. I did my pinwheels on the 2 corners here and here. Press this towards, and here I went with my 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangle. So that's with my 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangle, and this is what it looks like if you went with 2 2.5 inch squares. Half a dozen of one, 6 of the other. You choose which you like. If you're going to go scrappy, I would go that method probably. Okay, so this could make a really cute little boy or little girl's baby quilt. I thought I'd show you this one. Kevin loved that. This is a quilt that, well, as you can see here, it's a little worn. Yep, it is very worn because it's been loved. This quilt was supposed to go to a new nephew. And when I got it done, Kevin's like, no, you can't give that away. You need to save it for ours in case we have a little boy. So I kept it. Sadly, my nephew Caleb never did get a baby quilt. Oops, sorry, Caleb. And sadly, we never got our children either. So it just wasn't in God's plan. So Kevin got this quilt. It's a baby size quilt, but Kevin loves it. He uses it. It's on the bed. When he just needs a little bit more warmth, he pulls it over. So yeah. So what I wanted to show you on this is the setting. This setting of the ship is slightly different. And I may do a video on that later. And yep, it's using 2.5 inch squares. Just an FYI. But if you'll notice, the setting here is they've got the ship block is here. And then they've put a, let's see, what did we do? Oh, we put a 9 patch here as a block. So it's ship, 9 patch, ship, 9 patch. But what we also have in the middle is sashing. It's a sashing of, the background fabric. That's the size of your blocks. And then corner squares. So we've got sashing going this way and this way, separating our ships and our 9 patch. So there's a layout that you could use for your ships. Pretty simple and straightforward. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and have a great day.